Welcome to Proline TV here on this Thursday, March the 6th. Kevin Rogers with you as we take a look at NHL first period plays and also trends for every game. We'll have a couple best bets here at the end of the video, coming off a 2-0 night on Tuesday as we hit the Flames in the first period. They scored 4 goals in their win against the Flyers. And also, we had the under in the Stars Devils first period. So we're looking to build on that going into Thursday's action. And without further ado, let's get right to it as we will go to our trusty first period sheet. If it's your first time joining us, we like to go over the first period stats, which I cover throughout the entire season on this sheet. So obviously, a lot of good stats here, a lot of good information. And if you've been with us before, then you can come back and check it out once again. So, with all that being said, let's get to the games for Thursday night. We're going to start in Philadelphia between the Jets and the Flyers. And Winnipeg, a heavy favorite in this game coming up on Thursday night. And Winnipeg, they have not been very good on the road, as you see in the first period, just 10, 12, and 8. They trailed the Islanders 1-0 on Tuesday night before losing that game. Much better, obviously, at home for the Jets. Meanwhile, Philadelphia has been up and down at home in the first period, 11, 11, and 8 so far on the campaign as we go to the Flyers page. And they just played Winnipeg back last Saturday on the road, trailed 1-0 through one, ended up winning that game in the shootout 2-1. But the Flyers, though, have trailed after the first period in each of the past two games, as I mentioned with that Flames win we had on Tuesday, giving up 4 goals in the first and losing that game 6-3. Meanwhile, for the Winnipeg Jets, a bit of a struggle for them, at least of late. They won 3 straight after the Four Nations break. They had an 11-game winning streak, in fact, but now they dropped 3 in a row, and the offense has not really shown up, scoring just 4 goals in the past 3 games. And also, you see the teams that the Jets have lost to. Nashville's out of playoff contention. Philadelphia and the Islanders probably won't be in the playoffs. I mean, the Islanders maybe could be a wild card team. We'll see when it's all said and done. But the Jets, though, not playing great opponents at this point and still struggling. And even all the teams they played after the Four Nations break have not been playoff teams. I mean, Ottawa's probably in the playoffs. They'll be a wild card. But still, St. Louis, San Jose won't be in. And they had some wins there, but still an up and down second half for the Jets so far, but coming off back-to-back unders. And we'll see if Eric Comrie plays on Thursday night or if Connor Hellebuck will end up be saved for Friday on the back end of the back-to-back at New Jersey, which is possible. But this first period total, it sits at around 130, minus 130 for the over in the first period. I think this one will be a pass, at least for us. Now, going to the next game, the Blue Jackets and the Panthers, they meet in South Florida. And we had talked about at least the first few videos on here about Columbus and how good they've been in the first period this season. And they're now 28, 13, and 20. A lot of that success at home. They did trail Tampa Bay 2-1 after the first on Tuesday night. So they had a nice stretch of not trailing after the first period, but that is now done. The Panthers, meanwhile, 25, 20, and 17. Also, the Panthers have gone under more at home than on the road in the first period. Columbus, the same thing, a lot more unders in the road than at home. And looking at their team pages, first with the Columbus Blue Jackets, you go back to, in fact, it's pretty amazing, the beginning of January, and they've trailed only twice at the end of the first period in this stretch. And they had the back-to-back scoreless games with Detroit and gave up the 2 goals against Tampa Bay back on Tuesday. And so far, they are 3-2 to the under through the first 5 games in the first period in the post break. Now, as far as the Panthers go, they have caught fire of late, winning 4 in a row, but also you see 4-1 to the under since the break in the first period, and actually a couple scoreless games in the first period against Calgary and Tampa Bay in the last 2. And the Panthers earlier this season They played at Columbus, and it was a scoreless game in the first period back on October 15th. Spencer Knight played in net that game. We won't see Spencer Knight because he's in Chicago now with the Blackhawks after getting traded over the weekend. So we'll see if Sergei Bobrovsky will play against his former team, which he probably will. Coming up on Thursday, the Panthers acquired Vitek Vanacek from San Jose. Probably unlikely he'll get the start immediately. Maybe he'll start Saturday when the Panthers play Buffalo, but likely see Bobrovsky against his former team. Meanwhile, the next game we will take a look at the Hockey Club of Utah heading to Detroit to take on the Red Wings. And first for Utah, we haven't really discussed them as much just because we haven't drawn them on the show as often. But the number I like to point out here, if you have the ability to bet a first period tie, Utah is definitely worth a look. And the Hockey Club on the road, 17 ties in the first period out of 30 games. So that's pretty strong that they, for some reason, they play these 0-0, 1-1 games at the end of the first period. So out of all their games this season, out of 61 games, 28 ties. So not bad for the Hockey Club. Detroit, meanwhile, not great numbers as far as the first period goes, 19, 22, and 20. But they are 18 and 15 at home to the over, 18 and 9 on the road to the under. So still a positive over team in the first period. Let's go and check out the Red Wings. And for them, 4 consecutive games not scoring a goal in the first period. And we had talked about against Carolina on Tuesday how Carolina had struggled on the road to score in the first. The Hurricanes got a late goal in the first period to lead that 1-0. And Carolina eventually won 2-1 on Tuesday in Detroit. But the Red Wings, since scoring the 3 goals against Anaheim back on February 23rd, no goals in the first period in 4 straight games and 3 consecutive unders. Meanwhile, for the Hockey Club of Utah, what they have done, they are coming off of a 4-game homestand. They won 3 of 4. They haven't played since Saturday against New Jersey, lost that game 3-1. But up and down numbers, but you see here going back towards the end of January that the Hockey Club 7 times has been held without a goal in the first period and only led twice through the first period, and they had high scoring games. So basically when Utah scores 1 or less, that this team has struggled to lead after the first period, and they've had a lot of games where they've not scored. So friend of a back-to-back for Utah as they go to Chicago on Friday. But want to point this one out too. I had to make the screen bigger, so it's kind of hard to see to zoom in and zoom out. But this black right here next to the penalty killing in this column J is no rest. And I'm sure you could probably see it here if we go move over. With no rest recently, what Utah has done. Actually, let me back up a second. The front end with no rest, because again, they won't have rest on Friday in Chicago. But the front end with no rest. At LA, 1-1 tie. At Carolina, no, or with the front end of the back-to-back, I should say, 1-1. Another tie there. 2-0 at Minnesota back on January 23rd. Trailed San Jose 1-0. Seattle trailed 2-1. I guess more so past the ties, you could look at an over here in the first period. Understandably, Detroit has not had a lot of overs at home recently, but maybe after Detroit has struggled, New Jersey, the game against New Jersey that Utah had, they got shut out. Could look at that. It's not a best bet, but just looking at what Utah and Detroit can do, and that game right now, it's minus 125, minus 130 for the over in the first period. So that's not a crazy number to lay if you wanted to between Utah and Detroit. Buffalo and Tampa Bay, the next matchup we will isolate in Tampa coming up. And first for the Lightning, they have been excellent. We'll get to their team page in a second. I just want to point out this number. Tampa Bay at home this year, 18-4-8 in the opening period. Also 11-20 on their totals. So 20 unders, 11 overs at home. A lot of low-scoring games. Seems like the Lightning lead every first period at home, 1-0. But Buffalo, much better at home, not great on the road, but they've been a really good over team on the road. So with that being said, we'll go with Buffalo to begin with here. And Buffalo Scored 5 goals against the Rangers back on February 22nd, the first game out of the break, 5 out of the shoot. And since then, they've scored 1 goal in the first period in the past 5 games. So Buffalo has really struggled in the first period. Meanwhile, for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and yes, they had a 2-1 lead against Columbus on Tuesday, but a lot of the other games at home, they don't allow goals at home in the first period. Going back against Calgary, led 1-0. Edmonton was 1-1. Seattle was scoreless. But even looking back at here, the blue is Tampa Bay at home in the left column. 0-0-0-1-0. So they allowed 1 goal in the first period on that 5-game homestand. They allowed 1 goal in the 3-game homestand and 1 against Columbus. So Tampa Bay, just a machine at home in the first period. They had their 8-game winning streak snapped against Florida on Monday, bounced back the next night against Columbus. But you see how good they've been in the first period. Tough team to fade, definitely in the first period. And if you want to look at Tampa Bay in the first period, you have to lay nearly 200. But if you want to go minus a half in the first period, you have plus 115. So perhaps a look there for Tampa Bay to lead after the first period on Thursday. The Bruins and the Hurricanes in Carolina, and they meet up at 7 o'clock. The Bruins, it's been just a complete disaster for them. And they've lost, look at that, 5 of 6 since the break, 7 of 8 since February the 5th. So Boston has completely fallen apart. Trailed Nashville 2-1 on Tuesday after the first period, lost that game 6-3. You see, if they don't score goals in the first period, they're going to trail every time. That the games they've led after the first 2-0, 2-0, 2-1, 2-1. That's pretty amazing that the Bruins, when they bust out, yes, they're going to lead. A lot of teams would lead by when they score at least 2 goals. But if they get held to 1 or obviously 0, they're not going to lead. But if they get even held to 1, then they're probably not going to lead. But the Bruins, though, it's just been feast or famine in the first period. For the Carolina Hurricanes, I've talked about how bad they've been on the road in the first period, but even at home, hasn't been that great. Yeah, they led Buffalo 3-1, but they trailed Edmonton 1-0. They were scoreless with Calgary on Sunday on the back end. And you're going back to the end of January. They've given up a goal in the first period. What is that? 9 times. And now it's been back-to-back games without allowing a goal, but still they've had their problems in the first period. And they've only led twice so far in this span since the end of January at the end of the first period. A stay-away game for me between Carolina and Boston. Calgary and Dallas, they hook up in Big D. And the Flames, off of a good performance against Philadelphia, they went through this road swing, and this is a murderer's row. Washington, Tampa Bay, Florida, Carolina. What do you expect out of them? They actually won at Washington. And they hung with Carolina, lost that game in overtime, but it's a tough stretch. They beat Philadelphia. Now they go to Dallas, which is not going to be easy. And going back, Calgary did lose to Dallas on the road 6-2 back on December 8th. That was a 1-1 game after 1. So you wonder if this is going to be another over in the first. For the Stars, very good numbers in the first period. I mean, overall, too, they're 5-1 in the last 6 games, but also 5-1 in the first period. They trailed Columbus early 2-0, lost that game 6-4. But at least at home so far, 2 really good scoring or high scoring games in the first period against LA and St. Louis. Only got 1 against New Jersey on Tuesday. But high scoring games for Dallas early. They're taking care of business. And the Stars, they are heavy favorites in the first period. Not a surprise. Laying 210, 215, you get plus 110 if you took Dallas minus a half coming up on Thursday. The next game we're going to look at is San Jose and Colorado, because our 2 best bets are coming up, and we'll get to them after we preview this game between San Jose and Colorado. The Avalanche are nearly minus 300 in the first period, which should not be shocking to anybody. But Colorado, though, in the first period, a lot of unders recently. 4-1 to the under in the last 5 games. 4 times they've held the opponent scoreless. They gave 2 goals to Minnesota back last Friday, ended up winning that game 5-2. For San Jose, you got to give them a little bit of credit here. They've won a couple in a row. They held Toronto and Buffalo scoreless. through one. Now, granted, they haven't scored a first period goal in 3 straight games, but also they've done a better job defensively. So that's got to be something to be a little bit happy about if you're the Sharks. But looking back at what they've done against Colorado in the first period, they trailed 2-1 back on October 20th at home. And then the next matchup, they trailed 1-0 at home, lost that game 4-2. So San Jose in both meetings with Colorado, they trailed after one, and again, heavy price to pay for Colorado in the first period. Now we're going to look at our best bets, as I will come back on for a moment. And our first best bet, we will look at the Edmonton Oilers, who have been awful of late, and the Montreal Canadiens have been really good of late, but we're going to go against that trend and take Edmonton minus a half plus 105 in the first period coming up on Thursday. Now we'll go back to the notes here, and first we'll start with the Edmonton Oilers. Edmonton, who was in the Stanley Cup final last year, we all remember, got to Game 7 against the Panthers, ended up losing. These are pretty poor numbers since the break. Yes, they led Philadelphia 2-1 after the first, lost that game 6-3, and then went 3 straight, scoring a goal in the first, but also allowing a goal in the first. Didn't lead. They did lead Carolina 1-0 after one. Got bombarded by Anaheim in the first game back from a long road trip, 4-1. Always a tough spot. But now I think coming back home, that they'll get Stuart Skinner back in net, and they will hopefully turn this thing around. Now, they did get shut out by Montreal earlier this season, so some motivation, I'm sure, for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, looking at Montreal, that's just amazing what they've done. That the Canadiens, probably the best turnaround we've seen. I mean, them in Washington, obviously, but for what the Montreal Canadiens have done this year, just outstanding that they have found a way to get back into the playoff race and just really, hang around. That's what they're doing. And they're going to try to steal a wild card spot. They won 5 in a row. They are 3-0-2 in the first period, 4-0-1 to the over. But look at those numbers. They've scored 3-2, 2-0, and 3. That's impressive. But with all of that being said, though, I got to think that with this price of getting the Oilers at plus 105 just to lead at least by a goal in the first period, I got to expect Edmonton to come back here, that they got to come back, play a little bit better, and who knows what will happen for the game. But I'm going to go with the Edmonton Oilers for minus a half in the first period for our first best bet. Now, for our second best bet, we're going to go with the total. Kraken and the Predators, we're going to go with the under on them now in the first period. Let's look at Nashville first of all. Nashville off a good win over Boston on Tuesday, but I don't know how much I trust this team to do this again and have a good performance. Now, looking back, let's go back. I know it can be selective here, but to the end of January, after the first period when scoring 2 goals, they got held scoreless against Pittsburgh, scoreless against Colorado. I understand that was a 2-week break, but still. Scoreless against the Islanders. They just can't put it together in back-to-back games. And going over to the Seattle Kraken, Seattle is actually coming off of 3 straight games allowing 2 goals in the first period. And Joey Daccord played in all of them, and Daccord's been really good this year. He's had problems in that first period. You go back to even the beginning of February, he's allowed 2 goals or more 6 times, which is nuts. But I got to believe that he can put it together here in the first period and have a better showing. And also on the road, we've seen a little bit better numbers as far as a total standpoint. 3-1. That one went over against Edmonton, but 3-1 to the under in the last 4 games in the first period for the Seattle Kraken on the road. And the Kraken, they don't get on the power play in the first period. And as long as they can keep the other team away from scoring on the power play, they've had some problems there, giving up goals on the power play. Nashville has scored 1 power play goal since the Four Nations break. I'm going to go with the under between the Kraken and the Predators coming up on Thursday night as our second best bet. Once again, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel here at Proline TV. A lot of great content on here. You can check out the NASCAR videos, previews, as well as March Madness is finally here. Conference tournaments are underway, and we'll keep you up with the NHL first period best bet videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, we appreciate you watching. I am Kevin Rogers. Thank you very much. We will be back with you next Tuesday for another edition of our NHL first period trends and bets. Again, I'm Kevin Rogers, and we will talk to you again soon. We appreciate you watching here on Proline TV. And as always, best of luck with your bets.